Welcome back, everybody, to your daily update on the state of the Malazan Empire. And here we are with the other half of Book 2 of Reaper's Gale. It's the end of that one, and tomorrow I'll be starting to talk about Knuckles of the Soul, the third part, the third book. So today we're going to talk about that. I feel it's going to be a quicker video today, for whatever that's worth, because there's not that much that made me think a lot through the one today. Maybe I was also a bit distracted for all kinds of personal reasons. I don't know, but yeah, we'll see. Anyway, let's get this started. Cheers. Well, so first of all, the ending, the absolute ending of book 2 is just really well done, because it basically shows us where we are and where we go, what's going to happen in book 3. In a way, it's I mean, you can't call it a cliffhanger because he basically, just turned the page and continues, but it's still done really well. We'll go back to that later on. Apart, like before that, we're still, having the same basic, things going on in Letheras at the Dreen, like on the Aldan, that bit there, and we have some of it, with Jan Tovis actually converging on the part where Shurk Elal is hanging out, which is the Fenreach. Is it Fenreach? I don't know. There. That part. And those are like the three main areas that we're talking about here. And those different, parts of the story are moving. Those different parts are moving towards what we obviously know will be like some kind of conclusion or convergence near the end of the book. And there's a lot of action in, at least happening in the Aldan. We have that whole battle between the Lethery forces and Red Mask's forces, where Red Mask manages to win a first victory. I'm not going to say decisive victory, but he wins a first victory over the Lethery forces by using their hubris and by using their hubris against them. And this is an interesting bit there, like what I just thought about is the idea of hubris and arrogance being a problem is one that is both obviously a classic of of just real life. Overconfidence leads to problems. Obviously, we know that. It's it's just a fact of life, and it's definitely something that people need to know, need to understand when they're trying to do stuff. But on the other hand, you have the idea of hubris. And hubris is one of those important themes or tools or whatever you want to call it. Themes, I guess, is a good way to use it. Within classic Greek mythology and mostly Greek tragedy, right? So the idea of hubris is that this overconfidence leads, which is called hubris, leads to a person suffering from hubris being cursed by the gods and being brought low. And you see that in a lot of Greek tragedies, that motif of this rise of someone becoming super confident, super arrogant, at some point comparing themselves with the gods, and then the hammer comes down, or the thunderbolt thrown by Zeus in that area. And the interesting thing there is that with Greek historiography, for example, you see that motif being carried over from mythology into historiography. For example, when you look at the not the Peloponnesian Wars, but the Persian Wars, the histories written by Herodotus, which are a book that you all should read because it is just fantastic. There's so much cool stuff going on there. It's you want to call yourself a fantasy reader, go read Herodotus at least once. It has gold-digging ants, it has the phoenix, it has all this great stuff in there. Plus, obviously, the idea of the Spartans fighting against the Persians in Thermopylae and the battles of Marathon and all this other great stuff. So go read that book. It's honestly, it's really good. But the point is that the way Herodotus there describes the loss, like the failure of the Persian invasion, of both Persian invasions, because it's two of those. It's the one of Xerxes and the one of Darius. But the point is, like, you have these two Persian invasions, and both of those are basically about hubris and being punished for hubris, because hubris is something that needs to be punished by the gods. And he takes the actual historical events, or whatever, well, we can assume sort of were the historical events. He takes those and puts them into this framework of hubris, because the Persians obviously lost, even though, from the outside they were much stronger in numbers and so forth. And he uses that mythological, dramatical motif of hubris to frame his narrative of those two failed campaigns, Persian campaigns into the Greek heartland. And we see something similar there going on now within the way the Lethari are this overconfident empire, and their overconfidence is basically what drives them now. Yes, they could have known better, made smart choices, and that's I guess is the interesting bit. There is what I want what I wanted to come to is there are dumb mistakes, military tactical mistakes made on the ground, and they might not even be actually made out of hubris. For example, there's the fact that obviously the Lethari don't know that Heredmask has those two chain Jamal that obviously destroy the entire the supply camp and stuff like that. We don't have that, but the point is that the amount of small mistakes, and some of them are a lot, when you look at the actual battle, which I mean, come on, it's not my strength to look at this kind of battle. I'm not a war gamer. I'm not a military history fan. But the point is that the Atri Praetors' decisions at that point are not necessarily made out of sheer hubris, maybe at the beginning, but she realized relatively quickly that she is up against a really powerful and smart tactical genius of a commander there with Red Mask, and she tries to do the right thing there. But the overall narrative is that the Lethari were overconfident, and their overconfidence, which we have seen elements of before, we have seen signs of that before when she talks to Brulhandar all the time. We see that, and when you look at that, the overarching theme is Lethari hubris being the downfall of them, at least for this first battle there. And what I was trying to figure out, to point out here, is the fact that a number of small, understandable, not necessarily driven by overconfidence, tactical mistakes, can nevertheless give the overarching image of hubris being the downfall of that campaign. We'll see whether that campaign fails in the end, but that battle was lost because of a lot of small tactical mistakes, and not all of them were actually made because of overconfidence. Some of them are just errors of judgment that sometimes happen and stuff like that. But yeah, I wanted to show this idea that kind of arcs back to something that I've spoken about before, that historiography and history, but mostly historiography, is something, is the idea of putting these individual events into a greater narrative framework to actually answer the overarching question of why. Because when we ask the question of why did the Lethari lose that battle, the answer we're looking for, usually, most people, unless we're actually studying military theory or whatever, the answer we're looking for is not to say yes, because those soldiers in that specific battalion moved too early, moved too soon, and or this small individual bit. We're looking for an overarching answer that will be like something like, yes, they lost because they were overconfident, didn't scout enough, and then didn't know all the facts. And then the big lesson that you take from that is that, you I don't know, your Sun Tzu or Kellen Vet's type of pithy small thing of like, know the enemy better than yourself, or the ground is the enemy, or whatever, that kind of thing. But that's sort of what we're looking for when we're asking for answers. And hubris as the the plot line, or whatever you want to call it, the narrative of hubris leading to a downfall, is one of those answers that we might get from actually putting a lot of more or less random or disconnected individual decisions into a larger narrative framework. That's sort of what I felt is like the thing that we can take out of there. I also enjoyed that conversation between Tuck the Younger, Tuck Annister, and that elder who knows that dread secret of Red Mask, which we have not yet found out yet. But we'll see. We'll go back to that later, I guess. And you have that conversation. Both of them are speaking the truth, and both of them think the other one is lying, and the conversation fails on that account completely. And it's just like, it's just done very well, and just like so sad because I've said it before, is one of those things that you see a lot in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, is how often things go to hell because people are not able to communicate properly with each other, or not able to talk to each other, or not listening. Or communication fuck-ups are one of the most expensive things within the Malazan Book of the Fallen, like when it comes to death tolls and stuff like that. Like a nice quick thing to keep in mind for later on, I guess, is that at some point it's mentioned that once again with talk, that the people, the Gadrobi, like the tribes outside of the Rujistan, call that like paying with your life the hound toll. And we already obviously know that the next book is called Toll the Hound, so I just figured I'll just throw this in there as like a sort of, because Erickson does that from time to time, where he mentions like upcoming book titles in an offhand remark. We had that with, I feel, in Memories of Ice at some point. There is is like a chapter heading epigraph about this Emperor of Midnight Tides, which foreshadows book 5, Midnight Tides. And here you have that small idea of the Hound's Toll being something. Being a saying of the Gadrobi outside of Darujistan. So yeah, just keep that in mind. It's just a cool thing to interconnect more the books that are already like very well interconnected overall. All right, what else should we talk about? There's so much, and I'm slightly my brain's all over the place. Is what I'm trying to say here. All right, let's look at Jan Tovis. We find out that there's so much more about her. It's like, she was mentioned several times in like small things in Midnight Tides and in the Bone Hunters, and now in Reaper's Gale. And now we find out a lot more about her, that she is part of the Sheikh being one of those people that were conquered and more or less destroyed by the Lethery, with that weird religious background and so forth. That's an interesting, like, this is tangent warning, which is probably something I should do more. Tangent warning. There's a long discussion about religion with that whole idea of the Sheikh and the Sheikh priests slash witches and all that stuff. And Jan Tovis realizing that the development of a priesthood is actually a devolution in a way, or a step down in a way, because it suddenly makes something special knowledge and creates a hierarchy. And that is obviously true, and it doesn't take a genius to figure that out. But it's, for example, something that that explains why the idea of the Reformation in Christian theology in like the late 15th, early 16th century, depending on which kind of like reformators or reformers you want to look at, your Wycliffe or Jan Hus, or if you really want to go to Luther and Calvin or whatever. But because what you do there is, and that's something that comes back later on in the idea of the nonconformist religions in England, is exactly not so much a fight about different aspects. With Luther and the Pope, definitely, but later on it becomes once again not so much a debate about theological different aspects of dogma, different interpretations of dogma, but it's very much a fight about the democratization, is that a word? I don't know, of salvation, right? So because the thing is that if you have an established priesthood, and that's, for example, the question of whether mass should be held in Latin or in the local country, local language, is one of those questions, because the more specific knowledge the priesthood has about these questions. Let's not, like, let's all be aware that the fact, like, at least with Christian theology, is that it is sort of the key to salvation, because the priesthood are the ones who can, judge. They can interpret scripture and thus declare things sinful or not sinful. In a world where you believe in that kind of thing, it basically means that they are sort of the judges on whether you'll get into paradise or into hell, because they are the ones who kind of define what is sinful and what is not. And the idea of Reformation, of a lot of these nonconformist churches that then sort of become that at some point partly turn into evangelicalism, but I'm not going to go there today, is that the idea is to have and this is like the radical thing that someone like Luther does, is like by having a Bible translation in the vernacular, in the actual country language that people can read, gives access to that knowledge and thus to salvation to potentially everybody. Now, that obviously brings a lot of other problems with it in religion, but I just wanted to, go off on that for a moment and explain that, like, some of those seemingly theological debates and controversies of the 15th and 16th and 17th century are actually really about the question of specialized knowledge and thus specialized power, and trying to take that bit out. Now, did that work? Did it not work? I'm not here to say about that. I can just, I just felt like pointing that out for a moment, because I found it cool to have that small debate of that topic in there, because it's like very closely linked to some of the stuff that I do for my studies when I do my studies. So there's that. And we meet her brother or half brother, Yedan Derek, the Watch. And yeah, we'll have more about those two in the future, I'm pretty sure, but I'm not going to go and, spoilers and stuff. So we have that. We see that there is this culture that has remained hidden. I don't want to call it like cultural steganography, but it's kind of is exactly that. You have that culture of the Sheikh being very much embedded into Leathery culture, them trying, taking Sheikh officers or Sheikh soldiers into their units and so forth. But the way that a like seemingly defeated culture can survive under the surface, under the veneer of Leathery culture, and then return when it's needed, that is, that's just cool. And it's something that obviously is once again something that we can look at in our real world and our real cultures, and see how, if that works there, because it obviously raises the question of identity once again. It's like, are those people Leathery? Are those people, is Jan Tove's Twilight, is she Leathery? Is she Sheikh? Is she both? How do those things work or not work? That's something that I feel a lot of us not all of us, but a lot of us people need to answer for ourselves often, depending on what kind of, how our identities are combined between like our heritage and all these other aspects that we drag around with us. So there's that, and that's pretty nice. Nicely done, even though I have my issues with the way those Shake witches talk, because it's I feel it's slightly overdone, but then again, I might just not be conversant enough with English to actually get all of that aspect of those, like, that specific dialect kind of thing that they're supposed to talk. And sometimes it's a bit too much for me. I feel it's slightly overdone, but that's probably just me. All right. What else? The whole conversation about between the errant and Feather Witch is, I feel like at some point I might just have to make a video on Feather Witch. I'm a bit wary about that because I feel it might come off as like too, I don't know, mansplainy, whatever kind of thing, but we'll see. Maybe I'll do something on that topic. But yeah, we see her, like the errant, another prime example for for arrogance and hubris. They're completely like underestimating Feather Witch because he thinks he's a god. I mean, he is a god, but still. We see all of that, and we slowly see him lose, in a way, like his way, or getting himself into a lot of trouble because of arrogance and false pride. And the thing that I found interesting there is that, like, the first two times I read it, I didn't fully realize, and even though it's fully explicitly said, because the ghost of Kuru Khan says it actually, like, the question of how much of that is the errant being just a dumbass, and how much of that is the influence of that ocean spirit, that sea spirit, that is captured there, and that he is kind of, not contacting, but, getting too close to, and how much is that just that drive for power and arrogant thing there with that god on the one hand, and how much of that is just the errant being a dumbass. And I feel like my last two readings, I was like, yeah, well, he's an arrogant bastard. He's a god who doesn't get things, and he's also like, yeah, he's an elder god, and he hasn't moved with the times because he's still into holds, and holds are so 2015. We don't do that anymore. But yeah, I'm not sure about that anymore, because I felt this time around I was like, maybe he just got too close to that and didn't realize it. It still makes him a dumbass because he didn't realize it, but he might not be fully to blame for what happens to him, is what I'm trying to say this time around. I'll keep an eye out on that one. Now, the other thing that I found really cool this time around is language stuff, actually, which I usually don't pay that much attention to. But we have this idea that the shield anvil is called a Torud Segul. And then we are even find out that the Segule are called Segule because of that language bit being the anvil. And then we can take that back and realize that there is that Cabal in Darujistan. That's called the Torud Cabal. And I'm like, wait, does that mean they're like the Cabal that shield the city because they're sort of the city's protectors? Is that a thing? Or am I just fucking up lore and language again, because that's something I do, or I tend to do? All right. I guess like two more things today, and then I'll be done for today. One of them, there's a lot more like slapstick, fun humor with Tehol, Bak, and Ublala Pung. The amount of really dumb humor there is just like, you have that's something that I feel we should maybe talk more about, is how Stephen Erickson can write a really serious book there and then in one moment just make really dumb jokes about shit. Like, seriously, there's a lot of toilet humor in there when from time to time. So you ponder all these like really serious questions and stuff, and then the next moment it's like Ublalapang really needs to go to the toilet and misunderstands how to use the leaves of a specific bush there. Now I'm Yeah, well, there's another thing there that I feel like at some point we need to talk about the portrayal of limited mental capacity in Ublalapang. Maybe that should be something to talk about, and I'm not quite sure how to do that, but maybe I'll look at it later on. So yeah, there's that. There's Ublalapang actually going to meet Karsa Orlong. Karsa Orlong talking to him and planning to send him to the islands to create an army for himself. There is that other thing with Karsa Orlong that I found interesting, where what's her name? Samar Dev formulates my issue with Karsa Orlong, which is that he seems to he seems to be proof for the fact that ignoring the rules of the universe might actually work, because it might lead to him those not applying to him. And I feel like, yes, he does that. But he's special, and that's the problem. It's like that doesn't work in general. It just works because he's a special person with very special abilities in a way. And that's something that I've touched on before when I compared him to Conan the Barbarian, where you have a similar thing that Conan can do stuff because he's not just a barbarian. He's superhuman in a way. He's a superhero, a superhuman. And Karsa Orlong obviously has superhuman and super Toblikai abilities in a way. He's beyond just being a normal Toblikai at this point. We all know what those are. They're obviously connected to what the crippled god tries to do with him, but it's still something to think about in the future. All right, there's that. There was one other thing that I wanted to speak about for a second. I'm almost certain I just forgot what it was, though. Let me think. Right. Redemption for the Edur. I feel that's a very interesting thing there, because we still don't need to we still need to figure out how all of that works, but the idea that even someone as fully corrupted as the Warlock King still believes in the idea of redemption for his people, of getting Kurald Emerald together again in whatever way, and we don't know if that's going to work or not. But the idea that there is a way back, for them from all the corruption they have suffered, that is a very powerful thing there. And I feel it's one of those themes that we have within the Malazan Book of the Fallen all the time. It's like the Edur are suffering for what they're doing here, and the way that Erickson juxtaposes it with Onrak entering into whatever world, which might be Telan, and actually becoming a flesh and blood Imas again, gives us, as a reader, I guess, that hope, because apparently that kind of, even from a completely hopeless situation, that thing might be possible to come back and be a fully alive person again. But I'll come back to that later on. I also realized that I haven't spoken about Dead Hedge meeting. Oh yeah, quick thing there. Dead Hedge meeting one of the missing fallen one, the missing unbound Chelana mass from the Seven Templar gods. When I was wondering why there were like 5 and not like 6, now we know why, because she's there. I still don't exactly know why she ended up in that in that realm with Hedge, I might just be dumb and missed something in the books. That's very, very likely that I missed something there in House of Chains. From what I remember, she's the one who, like Karsa, chopped her arm off, and Onrak used that arm to repair himself. But I still don't know why she has ended up in the same realm as Hedge, which seems to be like the arse end of Hood's realm, sort of. But I feel like I'm coming back to that later on because I've already blathered on for too long for today. So tomorrow I'll be back when talking about the openings of Knuckles of the Soul, plus probably all the stuff that I kind of remember that I wanted to talk about today and didn't do. So until then, have a great start of the week, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Cheers.